Alright, the enum array did not work either. It just starts off with printing out the things. So everything except enums worked, is what it looks like. Because we got all these objects, and that did what it was supposed to. So T-arrays and everything else worked, but the enums did not work. So the question is, why? Alright, so the different types that they actually support are bools, ints, doubles, strings, dictionaries, get numeric. Alright, container type, strings, dictionaries, lists, get next token, get property value, property value. Read string property if container type is blah. Get index by name string value. Okay, so it's expecting enums to be of a specific string name is what it's looking like. So if we just set this instead of EBS team blue or something, if we just set it to blue, is it going to work then? Enum is blue. Okay, so it does work if we use the string type inside of the object. So if we change our, so if we got like EBS teams blue, we want our enums to not be integers, we want them to be strings in JavaScript land. So inside of enums.js, name list, we want the counter. No, we want value. Yeah, I guess we want it as a string like this. So get string for enum, get string for int. Alright, so we probably want to make another function here. So we have get string for int and also get string for enum. So we want the integer is going to be, we're switching on the value, this is going to be the value subcounter, otherwise we're going to return 0. And we'll return undefined. Case value counter, like so. I believe that's what we want. Let's generate that. Okay, so we got all these. Undefined needs to not be that though. We need this to be undefined. Alright, so get string for int, get string for enum. I mean, really this should be like get int for enum. and we should be returning the counter. And this needs to be value sub uppercase. Alright, well that looks like it'll work just fine. Let's make sure I didn't screw anything up. No, that compiles. What about this guy? Make sure it runs. I mean, I'd rather use integers, but I'd also rather not fight a battle that means nothing. Alright, so we got blue, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red. Awesome. So our complex objects work, our simple objects work, and everything else works just fine. So we can actually pass full structs of everything over back and forth, and it will marshal them properly. Okay, so we can totally do this and set them equal to each other and all that sort of stuff. So we can also push dirty objects across. So on our object, we can call set dirty, and the game is going to get called with the actual object. And I guess we should, at the end of our frame, after everything has been updated, then we like push dirty objects over. And that's how we'll have to set it up. So how do we map these objects back to each other? I guess we need like an object container sort of thing. I have to figure it out. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'll be right back. So I'm going to need a system. Now, what I'm thinking about is how exactly I want to, like, I do want an auto-generated event system. Like, hey, this thing happened, here's this data. But I also want, like, object replication and listeners for those objects. So I'm just updating some numbers. All right. Well then. So we need two systems here. We need one which is an event system, like a global event system. And the things that we want are kind of an event. And then we've got the event is going to be just the type, and then it's going to be the data. So data object. And that's just going to be boom. So we need this in C++ land, and we need this otherwise. And so the event will just fire, and then we'll just have all of our listeners listening to the event itself. And that should be easy enough to make in both sides. And what we're going to want to do is, yeah, so the game, it'll be like the game instance, and then the global event system, global event uObject, and then we'll have a list of events that you can bind and unbind to, and they'll just be broadcast when we do that. So we can, basically they'll be like on event, and it's going to take an int and then a data structure. I guess maybe we have to have a per event thing that'll call it per event and CPP. Yeah, okay, so it'll have to be per event. And the other thing is this replication thing with the dirty structs. Is that the same sort of thing? Like, if we have an object, how do we keep track of kind of what the object is? I mean, we could have like a copy of the object that we locally have, and then we like get a unique proxy object ID or some shit for it. I mean, it could work. What do use structs even come from? I mean, these are just structs. They're just use structs. So I'm trying to think about the way that we would actually have a container of, like, these are all the structs that have changed. I'm not really sure because they don't derive from anything. They're just structs. So I'm not really sure how to keep track of this in C++ land. Because what we would want is like maybe a global object. But how would we listen for it and then replicate it and have like an interest thing on it? So like, all right, maybe we should just take a real world example. So let's say we have the player stats screen. So we have an array of player stats, and we want to update a single player's stats. Like it changed, so okay, we can do stuff. So we have an array of player stats. The question is, how do we fetch it? The question is, how does JavaScript fetch the object that we want? We could just have a whole shitload of void pointers. Oh, Jesus Christ, that sounds awful. So convert object uObject. Well, I'd rather not make a whole shitload of uObjects. We could get a uStruct pointer. Okay, so we could have No. Well, how do we fetch all of them? Like, we could have a whole bunch of messages where we like call over to it and say like, "Hey, fetch this specific object for me as this thing." What we really want is like a data structure. It has to know what it is though for this thing to work, doesn't it? Let's see, we have invoke.js function. We have function ID, arg count, arguments. Maybe I'm... Maybe I can get a function ID and call invoke.js function with a list of function arguments. How do we get an fgoid though for the... So they got bind uObject, onProcess message received, send process message, convert struct, convert object, set converted, invoke.js function. Okay, so what we need to do is get the fgoid of a JS function. So if we could at the end of our frame just like queue up all this stuff, that would be another solution to this. Or you could just, instead of... Yeah, we could send a whole bunch of args over and just use the last one and sort it based on our next tick. That would be totally fine. So it'd be like dirty flags, and then we'd have the tick queues up the JS function call. And that'll all get run, and then we got like all of our stuff. All right. So the question is, how do we invoke this? We're using web browser, execute JavaScript, which is just doing this internal get main frame. So cf frame execute JavaScript. Alright, so we have scripting. onProcess bind uObject unbind. Alright, so CF web browser window has scripting, which is our scripting object. We can bind and unbind uObjects. And what we need to do is create like some sort of message or something else here for this. So the question is, how do we get this fGUID? So I mean, what we want to look for is any calls to invoke JS function inside of this bunch of code. Alright, maybe this is just the create the message get argument list. Set string function arguments is error. Alright, so there's something here where we're like building a message and we've got like this function ID sort of shit going on. So the question would be, can we actually make a process message and pass in our own function name? Because it's got invoke JS method here. With our function arguments. Yeah, okay, so we want to basically make a new thing here where we can call a function name with a list of arguments, which yeah, basically what we need to modify this. Okay, so jsscripting.h and all that. We need to add a new function here, which is, yeah, invoke JS method like this, but instead of getting our function ID here, we need to just use this this function name. And this is just going to be false. Okay, so that's added, but so how does this handle uObject method message? Okay, so got a message back or something. Is it the window that has this? On process message received is what we're looking at. We have this. If it's an object u method, okay, message get argument list. Message name. Release uObject. We're gonna want like a new type of process message or some crap, right? So we need like if, else if, let's do like message name equals text UE execute JS method. We're gonna do result message get argument list handle execute JS method message, something like that. Yeah, so handle execute JS method message with the arguments list. So if we go to this guy, and let's just copy this function. And what we need to do is, if message arg length should be, it should be 2, right? So we need a string and a list. It should be name and then args. So wrong arguments here. If invalid GUID, we don't want that. We don't need that. GUID to pointer object key. We don't need that, I believe. The method name is going to be sub-0. So u function is object find function. No, we don't need that. Create arguments to function argument. We do need the method name, so that's the method name right there. Coerce arguments to function arguments. Shit. Okay, so convert CAF argument list to a dictionary so we can use the destruct serializer. So named arguments, create. I have absolutely no idea. Alright, we're just gonna delete all this crap then. So it's gonna be invoke.js function. It's gonna be invoke.js function with a list of function arguments. So we've got our method name. So it's gonna look something like this, and we need to get the arguments out of the list. I don't know how the hell we're gonna do that. Let's make sure I didn't just blow the doors off of something. Alright, it looks like it didn't explode horribly, so how do we do this? So what we want to do is we want to basically go into one of these things that has a return value. So let's just have like a bool here on this guy and just like return true. And then we'll go into our Dashkin.js and set example complex objects of our promise equals this. And how do we do promises again? I always have to copy paste it because it's so annoying. Alright, so let's compile this. And we're trying to figure out how to get, because what we need to do is we want to efficiently call the method over there without a whole bunch of crazy stuff happening. Like us having to call and invoke an eval or something. We just want to call it across with something that it recognizes so it can do the marshalling and just have it all nicely set in the V8 variables for Chromium. The other thing would be if we can actually pass back a data structure that this thing recognizes with its return values. Question would be, how would we do that? Like, we'd be passing back a void pointer or some crap. It's like an array of something. Well, let's just see where this is with when it starts returning values, because that might give us a hint. Okay, so when we return back out of this, where do we go? Okay, we go into this invoke function. And we go into script core, which is inside of script core. Alright. And then we go back into our JS scripting. Okay, so it's process event. Okay, here we are. So let me just write this down. When we execute an event, we are in CEF.js scripting.cpp calling process event on the game. Alright, so params.getData. This is the function setExample complex object. The params were all this stuff that we sent, like the actual object. Alright, so we create this. So we have promise param, which is the return param. So how do we pull this out? Okay, so it's return back in serialize param.getData star function. Wait, what? So we pass in the definition of the function. Struct serializer serialize return policies. Okay, so this is gonna grab the function. So when we call serialize, we have our type info, which is setExample complex object. And that's how it knows what to use, is this. The struct is actually a void pointer. Okay, so the void pointer, which is the actual data of the ustruct. And then we have the type, which is setExample complex info, which has got like a uFunction object, which has a ustruct, setExample. So we have children. What is all this? Alright, so we have an object here, which is test complex object, which is a ustruct property. Then we have a uObject, which is an object. We then have next. So it's going to go through all these things and create a list. Return value was a bool. So we want to add a list of uStruct properties to this. We have a bool property. So this is a value type equals uSet property. Right property, current state. Okay, so then it has its result dictionary, and then extract the single value returned from the serialized dictionary to an array. And that's how they're getting this U object out of here. So we could call a message, like embed pointers using GUIDs. So that's what this is doing. It's been a very long time since I messed with any of this sort of stuff. Struct deserialize, deserialize. So it takes an outstruct and a type info log. So what is named args? Right, so that's deserializing the actual object. So this is getting the return is still star function, return backend, return policies, candidate property, parent property. Well, basically we have to pass an array of, we need an array of ustruct stuff, because then this goes in, it needs a ustruct. Okay, so we need to pass in an array of pointers to structures. We need to pass in an array of pointers to ustruct references. And then we need to iterate over those and copy the values out into variables. Like we need a variable for each one of them that we add to a list value is like another thing that we copy, extract the single return value. So our results is going to be So which one is this? This is get build ID. All right. So we get the name, and then we created a dictionary. Copy container value takes the dest key and source key. So dest key is a dest key type. I'm not really sure. I think this is passing in